Chapter 1. The Illusion of Physical Control. 3 months ago, you could open a jar without thinking about it. Now you sit at the kitchen table staring at the lid, waiting for your hand to remember how to close around something and hold. The pill bottle next to it rattles when you set it down. Your body, the one thing you never had to negotiate with, has started sending you invoices. The doctors have words for what's happening: names, statistics, timelines. None of them explain what it feels like to watch the one territory you always controlled turn into occupied land. Every Stoic promise about mental toughness sounds thin against a body that no longer asks permission. But somewhere in the wreckage, one truth stays standing. There is still ground that belongs to you. Right now, someone is optimizing their sleep score. Someone else is tracking their heart rate variability down to the decimal, certain that enough data will keep the body obedient. It is a reasonable hope. Until the morning, it fails anyway. A single test result, one fall on the stairs, and every metric you trusted becomes a rear-view mirror pointed at a life that no longer applies. None of this is an argument against taking care of yourself. The problem is, what gets built on top of the tracking? A whole identity propped up on the promise that the right habits guarantee the right outcome. Biology does not read your log. It does not honor a streak. It follows its own rules, and sometimes those rules include a diagnosis nobody's spreadsheet predicted. If your sense of who you are lives entirely inside your muscles, your stamina, your clear test results, you have built your house on rented land. The landlord is your own body, and the lease can end without notice. This is not a failure of discipline. It is the arithmetic of being alive in a body. Every strong person is one accident away from needing a different definition of themselves. The body breaks. That was always going to happen eventually. The question was never if. It was what would still be standing when it did. Marcus Aurelius spent his final years commanding an empire and enduring a war that would not end, all while dealing with health that the record suggests was never strong. He did not write meditations for readers. He wrote it in a tent at night to remind himself of one idea. There is a place inside a person that circumstance cannot occupy. He called it the Inner Citadel. Your inner citadel is not a metaphor for positive thinking. It is the part of you that forms judgments, chooses meaning, decides what a diagnosis means about your worth. No hospital can enter that room. No test result holds a key to it. It is the only property in your life that was never actually up for negotiation, even when it felt like everything else was. This does not make the pain smaller. A body that hurts, hurts. A limitation that closes a door stays closed, no matter how well you think about it. The citadel was never a promise that the outside world would soften. It is simply the ground you stand on while the weather does whatever the weather is going to do. Some days, that ground is the only thing that holds. None of this answers the harder question yet. If the citadel is real, if there is ground inside you, circumstance cannot touch, the next question is where the wall stands. Most people spend years defending territory that was never theirs to defend in the first place. The diagnosis is not yours to control. What you do with the news walking out of that office is a different matter entirely. Chapter 2. The dichotomy of control in personal crisis. 20 centuries ago, a man born into slavery figured out something that still holds. Epictetus taught that everything in life sorts into two piles. Some things are up to you. Most things are not. Your diagnosis belongs to the second pile. So does the timeline, the prognosis, the way your body chooses to respond to treatment. None of that was ever yours to command. Here is the piece people miss. Up to you does not mean easy. It means judgment, opinion, effort, honesty, the meaning you assign to what's happening. Not up to you means the diagnosis itself, other people's reactions to it, whether the treatment works the way the pamphlet promised. Two piles, confuse them, and you spend your strength defending a border that was never yours to hold. Not up to you, the cells doing whatever cells do while you sleep. Not up to you, the specialist's schedule, the insurance approval, the way your neighbor looks at you differently now. Not up to you, whether this gets better, stays the same, or gets worse. You can study every fact about your condition and still not own a single one of them. Up to you, whether you call this a tragedy or a fact. Up to you, the tone you use with the nurse who's had a long shift too. Up to you, what you do with the hour in front of you right now, regardless of what the hour in front of you tomorrow holds. That list is shorter. It is also the only list you've ever actually had. You cannot win a fight against your own biology. You were never supposed to. You were only ever supposed to choose what kind of person shows up for it. So much energy gets spent negotiating with what already happened, bargaining with a scan result, arguing with a lab report, like it might change its mind if you're persuasive enough. That energy has somewhere better to go. Every hour you spend resenting the fact of your condition is an hour not spent deciding who you're going to be inside it. This is not about pretending the diagnosis is smaller than it is. It is about noticing where you've been fighting a battle that was already decided and turning around to fight the one that's still open. The story you tell about what this means, that battle, is still live. It has been live the entire time. Somewhere there is a version of you sitting in a waiting room right now, rehearsing the fight you cannot win. Put that version down for a moment. The next question is not how to beat what's happening to your body. It's how to keep your mind from becoming a second casualty. One more thing lost to a condition that already took enough. Chapter 3. Fortifying the walls of the mind. There is a difference between what happens to your body and what your mind piles on top of it. The Stoics called this practice objective representation. Strip an event down to its bare facts before the story arrives. Not, this ruins my life. Just, my leg hurts today. The fact is almost always smaller than the story. Try it with fatigue. Not, I am too weak to keep going. Just, my body is tired right now. Try it with a bad scan. Not, everything is falling apart. Just, this is one piece of information about one part of my body. The label costs you nothing to remove and costs you everything to keep. Marcus Aurelius practiced this exact drill. "Take whatever is troubling you," he wrote, "and describe it plainly, stripped of the legend wrapped around it. Not a tragedy, not a disaster. Just wine that has gone sour, ash from a fire, a body doing what bodies eventually do." He was not being cold. He was refusing to let language make his suffering bigger than it needed to be. You do not have to feel nothing. You just have to stop letting the story get bigger than the fact. That alone changes everything about how the day feels. Build a small habit. Once a day, usually at night, ask where your thoughts spent their energy. Some of it went to today, the actual hour you were living in. Some of it leaked into next month, a future that has not happened and might not happen the way you fear. Seneca did something close to this every evening, reviewing the day before he let himself sleep. This is where the mind actually gets stronger, not weaker. Patience, you cannot fake in a waiting room for 6 hours, turns real in a waiting room for 6 hours. Courage you never had to test stays theoretical until a body that will not cooperate forces the question. The very thing that feels like it's taking things from you is the only place these particular virtues can be built. None of this makes the body work again. Nothing here is a trick dressed up as encouragement. What it does is give you something to actually practice while the body does whatever it's going to do. Honesty with the people around you. Patience with yourself on the days. Patience runs thin. These are not consolation prizes. They are the only muscles this particular season lets you train. None of this happens by accident. It happens because you built an audit, stripped a label, chose one honest sentence over one dramatic one. It happened on days nobody was watching. The next problem is what to do with the plans you had. The trip, the career, the version of your future you were counting on before any of this started. Chapter 4. Finding agency within the constraints. There is a phrase from Epictetus that rarely makes it into the, quote, graphics. He called it the reserve clause. Whenever you set an intention, attach a silent condition to it, circumstances permitting. I will walk today if my body allows it. I will finish this project, fate permitting. The goal stays yours. The outcome was never yours to guarantee in the first place. This is not pessimism dressed up in Greek. It is honesty about how much of any outcome was ever within reach. A runner trains for a race with the reserve clause built in, weather permitting, body permitting, and still runs at full effort. The effort is the part that was always yours. The finish line was always a guest in your plans, never the owner of them. The same clause applies to recovery itself. Not, I will beat this. Just, I will do the work in front of me today, and let the results be whatever they turn out to be. That single shift removes an entire layer of suffering. The layer that comes from demanding an outcome your body was never contractually obligated to deliver, no matter how hard you worked for it. You can work hard and still not get the outcome. Both things can be true. Neither one says anything about your worth. Something strange happens when the body's range shrinks. The mind, if you let it, starts reaching into rooms it never had time to visit before. People confined to beds have written books that outlasted the century they were written in. Not because suffering is secretly a gift, because attention, once it stops being spent on motion, has to go somewhere else. Maybe it is not a book. Maybe it is a conversation with your daughter that goes deeper than it ever did when you were both too busy to sit still. Maybe it is finally reading the letters your mother left you, the ones you kept meaning to get to. The constraint did not create the depth. It just removed the excuses that used to sit in front of it. There is an old Stoic image worth sitting with. You are not your body any more than a sailor is his ship. The ship carries him. It can be damaged, patched, eventually retired. But the sailor, the part that navigates, that decides, that notices the weather and adjusts, that part was never made of wood at all. This does not mean the ship stops mattering. A damaged ship still deserves care, still deserves grief when it takes on water it cannot pump out. But the person doing the grieving, the person choosing how to face the leak, is not the same thing as the hull. Losing function is real loss. It is not the loss of you. None of this was invented for a hospital room. It was written by people who never heard of a smartphone, a group chat, a doom scroll at midnight. Which raises a strange question. If a mental fortress built 2,000 years ago still holds up against a body falling apart, what is it doing sitting unused against everything else wearing you down? Chapter 5. The Unshakable Spirit in a Modern World. In 2002-6, the noise has multiplied. A body that will not cooperate is now competing for your attention with a phone that will not stop either. Notifications about things that do not matter. Comparison delivered in an endless feed. The ancient framework was built for war camps and exile. It turns out it works just as well against a feed designed to keep you anxious. Every generation thinks its chaos is unprecedented. Every generation is partly right and mostly wrong. What is different now is the volume and the speed. A diagnosis can arrive in an inbox instead of an office, cold and typed, next to an ad for something you searched last week. The tools built for slower centuries still work. They were never really about the pace of the world. They were about the pace of your own mind. So here is what a working day actually looks like, stitched together from everything so far. Morning. Separate the fact of the day from the story your mind wants to write about it before breakfast. Midday, notice where a plan needs a reserve clause attached to it. Night, run the audit. Find where your thoughts leaked into a future that has not arrived yet, and bring them home. This is not a lot of time. Maybe 3 minutes total, spread across a day that already asks so much of you. But 3 minutes of actual practice outperforms 3 hours of vague hope every single time. Hope is not a technique. A stripped-down fact, a reserve clause, an honest audit, those are techniques, and techniques are things you can actually get better at. None of this fixes the world. It was never supposed to. It just gives you a place to stand while the world does what it does. This is not a single decision you make once and then coast on forever. Some mornings the citadel holds without effort. Other mornings you have to rebuild the wall before you've even had coffee, brick by brick, one honest sentence at a time. That is not failure. That is what practice actually looks like every single day, for the rest of however long this goes on. Marcus Aurelius never meant for anyone to read his private notebook. Historians still are not entirely certain how it survived the centuries between his death and its first printing. But it did survive, copied by hand, again and again, by people who recognized something worth keeping. The practice outlived the empire it was written inside of, and it is still standing when a lot of empires are not. Remember the cage from the beginning of this, the body that suddenly became one. Here is the strange turn nobody warns you about. A cage only holds you if the whole of you fits inside it. The citadel was never inside the cage to begin with. It was the one room in the house the cage was never built around. The world can crumble, careers end, bodies fail, people you counted on disappear from your life in ways you never saw coming. All of that is real, and none of it is being minimized here. But the thing you built, quietly, on ordinary days, nobody was filming. That thing does not crumble with the rest of it. That is the part of you that gets to keep living in the house. Chapter 6. A Place to Stand. There is nothing unique about a body that eventually fails. It happens to kings and to people. Nobody will remember by name. What is not universal is what a person decides to do once the fact arrives. Some spend the remaining time defending a border that was never theirs. Others build something quieter instead, the kind of thing no diagnosis, no scan, and no doctor's calendar ever gets a vote on. None of this replaces a doctor, a treatment plan, or the people who show up with actual casseroles. Think of it instead as the part of the toolkit nobody hands you at the appointment. If someone in your life is standing where this started, in the kitchen, staring at a lid, send this their way. Sometimes the ground under someone's feet is just knowing they're not the only one standing on it.